Okay. Got my dogs in order. If you can see them. I don't know if you can see them. There's Kipper. He's getting big. Okay, so welcome back to another video, everybody. This is Unshaping the Earth. Today we're going to talk about a conspiracy theory, obviously. But, the moon landing conspiracy theory, if you can see on the video right here, they're trying to debunk the moon landing conspiracy theorists. So we are going to debunk the debunkers today, and we're just going to watch. I haven't even watched this video yet. I'm just going to go off the cuff. If there's something that I don't know, I might cut and try to find the answer or whatever, but I doubt we'll be having so much trouble with these mainstream people. So here we go. It's only 3 minutes long.
Ever since Neil Armstrong first set foot on the moon, the conspiracy theories began.
Okay, so first thing, flag is waving, no atmosphere on the moon, and obviously they're going to provide this instance. If you've seen this picture, this is one of the most famous pictures where they're always doubting about that, and obviously their explanation is sticks the stick into the ground with the flag on it, and the kinetic energy and vibration is going to cause the flag to wave or whatever, and that's the whole point. Or that's their whole argument, right? In reality, we have many other cases in which this is happening. And one of them, the most damning case, I think you could say, is when they get back into their lunar module and you see the flag waving. And I'll play that on the screen. The flag is waving back and forth for 15 minutes into the frame and out of the frame. Okay, you're not going to see them put that one on, obviously, because they don't do any research. They don't really care. They just want to make views and stuff, and perpetuate what they want to believe. So it's not. These people, these videos have nothing to do with actually finding the truth. It's mostly, rub my back. This makes me feel good that somebody explained this to me. Now I'm going to explain it to you. So, anyways. Great. This is a perfect picture of another reason why we didn't go to the moon. I'm surprised they're talking about shadows here. This is probably one of the worst pictures I've ever seen to make the diverging shadows argument. I've never even seen anybody use this picture for the diverging shadows argument. And, there's a good reason for that, because they want you to look at this and say, obviously, that doesn't make any sense. But, yeah, I mean, this looks pretty good. The shadows look like they're going in the right direction in this shot. And obviously they want to pick the most controversial one, in which, some might say, hey, it's not. Some might say it is. And now everybody's confused when there are other pictures that are much more clear and much more obvious than this one. But in this one, you can actually see the breaking up of the footprint and that is an obvious sign of moisture. So it's actually interesting that they use this photo, but it's for a different argument, obviously. So you see how defined and crisp this is. They say this is due to the makeup of the soil, and they have done experiments on Earth with very similar composites. And if you've seen the Mythbusters episode, they try to do the same thing to disprove the idea that the footprints weren't possible. And they did get a footprint, albeit the most the most terrible footprint you can imagine compared to this crisp footprint, right? I mean, you see some detail, but it's really out of focus. With this, it's the most crisp, that you could ever imagine. And then if you break up the footprint, like you touched it, it would literally break into little squares, right? Like you see in that tiny little, in that small section right there, you see these little squares. That is moisture. That's a sign of moisture. Anybody can go to the beach right now, make a sandcastle, and break little pieces off, and you'll see it. Obviously, it's doing that because there's moisture, right? So obviously, there's people out there just gonna, no matter what you say. But let's continue on.
Everybody loves a conspiracy.
That's Paul Delaney, astronomer and senior lecturer at York University.
Can you?
Okay, so their first argument is from authority. No surprise there. People want to, believe in authority. Okay, I'll shut up.
Effectively generate that type of illusion today? The answer is probably yes. But back in 1969, 70, 71, the answer is not.
Conspiracy number one. How?
Oh, okay. So his argument is they didn't have the technology back then to do it. They could not have faked it back then. That is the dumbest argument I've ever heard. You're telling me that they could go to the moon take a rocket, fly all the all that way to the moon under all these dangerous conditions, land on the moon, walk around and all that stuff and not die, and all these different ways that you could have died, and then get back in the rocket with your primitive technology, technology that's far, far, far behind the iPhone. Get back in there less than iPhone LM, rocket back up to their spaceship, orbit, fly back all the way to Earth, land in the ocean. That, you're telling me that's possible, but it wouldn't be possible for them to film that in a on Earth? Are you kidding me? It's so funny to me when people say that to make that argument, because it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous to say that they couldn't had a giant facility and have the backdrop and everything, sprinkle their dust around, put their cameras on, have these giant lights. That they think that is harder than actually going to the moon. It's just utterly ridiculous. All right, continuing.
How was the flag waving in no atmosphere? NASA knew image was everything, and if it wanted to secure more government funding, the public needed to be impressed.
A flag standing on the surface of the moon, which is limp, isn't nearly as good a photo op.
They made it look like it was waving in the wind by installing a horizontal rod on top of the flag. However, the astronauts were unable to extend the entire way, giving it that waving effect. Conspiracy number 2. Why aren't there any stars in the photos? A limited exposure range is the reason why we can't see stars in any of the Apollo photos.
Okay, that is another one that some people have made that argument. I would actually agree with this argument, which is I left it on the white screen. Let me.
Unlike.
Okay. It has to do with your exposure, right? That's what they just said. When you have a camera and you have a manual camera, especially like they did back then. The surface of the moon and the astronauts and all that stuff is very bright, right? So the camera, in order to not be washed out and not have a picture, you have to focus the light and have the light exposed, or the sensor exposed for a certain amount of time in order to actually get a picture. And if it's so the comparison would be the stars are much less bright and much dimmer than the surface of the moon. So in order to get that exposed, in order for the camera to actually capture the stars, you have to expose the sensor for a much longer period of time. Same thing on Earth. If you want to get a picture of the stars, a great example would be your modern iPhone, right? This is a recent development with like the iPhone 12 and the iPhone 11. You can set it to exposure where you can actually capture stars, and it's like a 3-second exposure. If you have a DSLR, you can expose it for much longer periods of time. You can expose it 10, 20, 2 minutes if you wanted to. And basically in doing that, you have to expose it for a long period of time, and it captures the stars. So you pretty much, you're gonna have to choose, right? Either I want to capture the astronaut on the Earth and we're not gonna get the stars, or I capture the stars and the astronaut's gonna be very, very dim and dark. And that's basically what it is. So when you don't see stars on the moon in these pictures, that's because the camera can't see them from the exposure. That's not to say the astronauts shouldn't be able to see them. And that's another great argument, which is the astronauts come home. Oh, what was it like? And they look like the most depressed astronauts you've ever seen. Like, I just saw Satan or something, or I, lost my faith. I don't know. They're standing, sitting in the meeting, and everybody's talking to them, asking them questions, and they say they could not see the stars from the surface of the moon, which is absolutely ridiculous. And it's not just ridiculous because they should have been able to see the stars. The other reason is ridiculous is because plenty of other astronauts who have allegedly gone to space, they have contradicting stories. Oh, we can see the stars on the bright side of the Earth when we're in space. Oh, we can't see the stars when we're on the bright side of the Earth. Oh, but what? It goes back and forth. But anyways, stars, interesting point. Some people make it because not everybody is, as educated on, science as other people are. So occasionally you'll have a conspiracy theorist who makes a bad argument. It doesn't mean that he's not correct in his original idea, right?
Our eyes, cameras can take in only a certain amount of light. If the exposure is too high, everything will look too bright. Too low, everything will look too dark.
The sun was shining on them. They were reflecting brightly. The surface was reflecting brightly. Stars on Earth, let alone the moon, it's the same brightness. They're relatively faint.
Conspiracy number 3. The shadows are wrong. Conspiracy theory.
Okay, actually, let's go back to this picture that he had, which I thought was interesting that they didn't even bring this up. In this picture, and it's a much bigger picture, it's just kind of zoomed in, you can see how the astronaut is completely lit up. Not only him being lit up, but the entire LM. And you can find that picture easily. This picture as well, or this image of the astronaut, as well as the rest of the lunar module, is completely lit up. It's in shadow. And the argument has been that the astronaut taking this photo is reflecting the light, and he's acting like a photograph. I don't know what the name is, but like this reflector, because in photography, say you're trying to take a picture of, a bride and a groom on the beach, right? And the sun is behind them. Well, the problem with that is they're being backlit, right? So in other words, the image, the background is being lit well, obviously, but the people can't be seen because of all that light behind them. So what they do is they'll take a reflector. It's just basically a giant sheet of some kind of reflecting material, right? And a lot of times they use like canvas, like a bright white canvas or something, and it takes that light and it reflects it back onto the people, so that way you can see them clearly and you can see the background clearly, and then you have this great image, right? That is exactly what's happening here, except, well, it's not a person, it's a light, it's an actual light, right? So to say that this tiny astronaut that's taking this photo is causing enough light to reflect on his fellow astronaut and the entire lunar module is just ludicrous. It's just crazy, right? So in reality, what we're seeing is there are two lights. You have the big giant light making the shadows and acting like the sun, and then you have that smaller light that they decided to add for the photographic effect to make it look all great, except they didn't realize that they're screwing everything up and they're making it look fake. So that was just that. And then here we go on to where they talk about the shadows.
Point out that since the sun is the only light source on the moon, shadow angles should be consistent.
Yep.
However,
right.
When sunlight hits the surface of the moon, some of it bounces off, meaning the moon itself becomes a reflective light source.
I've never heard that argument before. That sounds really dumb. Let's continue on.
Professional photographers refer to this as a film. That's why an astronaut in the lunar module's shadow isn't completely shrouded in black. The moon's light is softening the shadow. Conspiracy number.
Okay, so there they go, to kind of indirectly addressing what I just said, which is, again, pretty ridiculous, because you can see all the other images where the shadow is completely pitch black and the objects in that shadow is, there's almost no detail. You can't see anything, versus in the brightness, you can see everything, right? So it's ridiculous, right?
Number 4. Why didn't the astronauts die from radiation exposure? The spacecraft's hull shielded the astronauts from being exposed to lethal radiation while traveling through the Van Allen belts, layers in Earth's magnetic field that trap solar wind particles, creating high levels of radiation. Once cleared, they were exposed to natural background radiation.
You certainly wouldn't want the astronauts on the surface of the moon in their spacesuits for days on end, but for the hours that we're talking about on the lunar surface, the radiation environment is comparable to the radiation environment we have here.
Conspiracy.
That's pretty interesting that he would say that. But I think that the Van Allen radiation belts is, honestly, for me, I've been leaning more and more towards not using that as an argument as much, because there's always an excuse with NASA. Now, I'm not saying that that they're, that it wouldn't be true, that would be dangerous and all that stuff if indeed the Earth were a ball and blah, blah, blah. But the problem with the Van Allen belts, to me, is... Let's get a picture of these Van Allen belts. The problem with the Van Allen belts is that they always have this excuse, right? It's either they went a northern trajectory, which has pretty much been debunked during 1969. They actually said they went around the equator, pretty much. I mean, but hey, if they didn't, whatever. They're saying that, and then they're saying that they're going so fast to the belts that you couldn't have been exposed to radiation, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, Van Allen, who first discovered the belts, said that they were super dangerous and blah, 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 and then later he walked it back. So yeah, I mean, it's just it's always a never-ending cascades of answers from NASA, which is exactly what they would do if they were faking it, and it's probably the same thing they would do if they weren't faking it. So but in my opinion, I think the Van Allen belts, I don't see how you get past that. But if you were to say that they did get past it, right, the other interesting issue would be the film. How does the film get through all that radiation? You can't get a regular film on Earth through the radiation of a freaking airport detector without messing that crap up. So how is it that this gets through all this extreme radiation? I mean, that's another interesting thing. And then I think I mentioned before, as well, is that they say that these radiation belts are so dangerous, and that we have to solve these challenges before we send people to this region of space. I'm literally quoting NASA here, right? And everybody's response is, well, that's because of the technology. It's not the people that are in danger. It's the sensitive electronics, right? All these motherboards, these tiny signals going through the computer. Now, when radiation goes in, it affects it, it messes it up. That's a good argument to make. That makes sense. The only problem with that is I found other articles in which NASA has said that it's a danger to astronauts potentially. And of course, the excuse to that would be, well, sometimes space is unpredictable and we don't know when the Van Allen belts is going to change sometimes. It's not an exact science. We can't predict all the weather. So they always have another excuse for this stuff. But the interesting thing that I find is that they say that we've sent all these satellites into outer space and, to Japan. Yeah, Japan's in outer space. No, we've sent all these satellites, to Jupiter, I was trying to say, to all these other places. We've sent, what is it, the helicopter to Mars and crap. They say we sent all this stuff to space, and it makes it through the Van Allen belt just fine. But allegedly, the Orion capsule, oh no, we have to solve these challenges before we send people to this region of space. I mean, explain that, Einstein. I shouldn't even say Einstein because that's not a smart man. But, well, maybe he was, and he was just, a shill. I don't know. But yeah, they say we send the Orion capsule, right? And the problem with the Orion capsule is we need to solve the Van Allen belts before we send people past the Van Allen belts. Now, when they say people, obviously he means the technology, I guess. That's kind of what right before that he was alluding to, that the onboard guidance systems and computers need to be protected from the Van Allen belts. New shielding put to the test, right? Well, what kind of shielding was protecting that helicopter they sent to Mars, or the rovers and all these things? I mean, come on. You're telling me that just now this is a problem? Now that's the interesting thing. So, and they've also said that it's unsafe for astronauts. So, before the Van Allen belts, or before the moon landings, the Van Allen belts were dangerous. During the moon landings, they weren't dangerous. After the moon landings, now they're dangerous again for both technology and people. And I can show you the article where they say it's also dangerous to people, but of course they have an excuse for that. So it's just, it's a big, as you can see, it's a big mess. It takes me at least 5 minutes to explain this. When you're trying to talk to somebody about the Van Allen belts, or you want somebody to listen about it, you don't want to, drone on and on. All you need to say is, how do you get pictures back through the Van Allen belts? How does that work, right? We know film is sensitive. We know all that stuff. So how the hell do you get a photograph, that you allegedly took on the moon? How do you get that through the Van Allen belts when we know it destroys that stuff, right? That's a good question to ask, and you don't have to really go through all that mumbo jumbo, right? And then, obviously the problems with diverging shadows that we were talking about, the astronauts being lit up, issues like no noise in the lunar module as it's taking off and they're playing their crappy music, or issues like what's another issue? Just the parallax on the moon, where they have two pictures taken almost at the exact same time with the camera being offset by a few centimeters, and then the mountains are moving in the background who are allegedly kilometers away. That is totally fake, right? You have these great issues, and I can explain that very quickly to somebody. So anyways, Van Allen belts, whatever. I don't really care to make that argument as much anymore, but continuing on.
Levels of radiation. Once cleared, they were exposed to natural background radiation.
Yeah, and the background radiation is an interesting thing because allegedly the Earth protects us from the background radiation of space, and the solar radiation from the sun. Allegedly, they're sitting on the moon, and the sun is shining on them with its radiation. So forget the background radiation. What about the solar radiation from the sun? Isn't that kind of an issue? I don't know. But of course, it's not enough to kill them. So
certainly wouldn't want the astronauts on the surface of the moon in their spacesuits for days on end. But for the hours that we're talking about on the lunar surface, the radiation environment is comparable to the radiation environment.
Comparable.
Moon.
Are we going to send people to the moon to stand on the
Film Neil Armstrong stepping on the moon.
Are we going to send people to the moon to stand on the moon and not have a camera strapped to the outside of the lunar module?
NASA put cameras on every piece of the Apollo spacecraft. That's why we have stunning images like this, and this.
You don't go that far and miss the photo opportunity of a century of history.
If you're still skeptical, several photos of the moon's surface have been taken over the decades, showing Apollo lunar module exactly where Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin.
Oh, NASA assures you that they can show you pictures that they have taken since the Apollo missions that prove they actually went there. Because obviously, if somebody believes NASA are a bunch of liars and that they didn't go to the moon, then NASA therefore showing them more pictures that proves that they went to the moon is obviously going to solve their problems, right? You think, I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, why do people make these kind of arguments? I don't know. It's just like, yeah, we think you're lying, so we're totally going to believe you if you show us another picture. That makes sense. Continuing on.
Parked it 50 years ago.
The notion that a conspiracy of the magnitude that's required, needing tens of thousands of people to stay quiet about it for decades, again, you know, the US government can't keep a secret for more than a few hours, generally speaking, let alone for decades.
Okay, there's another interesting, stupid argument. And of course, this has been made, you know, to ad nauseum by all kinds of people who bury their heads in the lunar sand, if you will. Tens of thousands of people would have had to know about the moon landing being fake. Are you serious? You really think that? Do you think the people that were cheering in that room were like, yeah, we settled it, they're in space? You know, the people who see, you know, launch the space shuttle, they're all sitting in their little desks, and you have the desk, you know, facing the glass and all the screens and stuff, and then they say, well, okay, here's we made it to space. Oh yeah, and they throw their hats in the air, and they show that in the movie and in the movies and obviously in NASA and everything. You think those people know that it's being faked, right? You think all those people in that room that are cheering and doing their jobs think that it's fake? I don't think so. Why would they tell them, right? They don't need to tell them. They think that it's real. They think that they're actually somewhere. And the only difference is they're on Earth and they have no idea. Okay. They're, you know, the people, you think the people communicating to the astronauts know that it's fake, right? Why would they know? Why would they need to know? They're sitting in their office, in their room, or wherever they are doing their job, supposed to talk to the astronauts and make sure everything's fine. And what difference would it be if they're talking to them from, you know, a room on Earth, right? Okay, I mean that's you know, pretty simple, right? The only people that really need to know that this is fake is the guy who directs NASA, the freaking head honcho, and the people actually going to the moon. Those are pretty much the only people that know that we're not going to the moon. It's a very small number of people. Okay, so that's the first thing, and then the other thing is like, well, people would have found out if they faked it. Yeah, we've all found out. I mean, you know, but nobody's talking, and there's a good reason for that. Obviously, we know that the government kills people. I mean, I should make a video on that so we can have that deal dealt with. But yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that the government can kill people if they want to, and nobody's going to know about it. But you know, I'm sure there's other people who think that's absolutely insane. So you know, we'll just keep it simple for now with the arguments, but. Yeah, I mean, no, tens of thousands of people, not at all. That's a total straw man argument. You're building up your own argument. If you don't know what a straw man is, you're building up an argument that nobody ever made and then saying, yeah, that's impossible. Okay, and as far as I can tell, I've not heard anybody say that everybody at NASA knew that it was fake. Obviously, the guy building the freaking rocket in Texas and building these different parts all over the United States, none of those people knew that they weren't actually going to the moon. All right, none of the people in that room knew. Probably the person talking to the astronauts on the radio didn't know. All kinds of people didn't know. The only people that need to know is the astronauts and the dudes telling the astronauts to go, right? Which would be NASA's head people. So. Small group of people, right? That's the point.
At 15 seconds, guidance is internal.
Oh wow, that's the end. That's the end of the video. That's all they got for us. That's the best they can do. Best they can do. Wow. So thank you guys for watching. This has been a 5 famous moon landing conspiracy theories debunked again by a conspiracy theorist debunking the debunker. If that makes any sense. So yeah. If you guys want to see more debunking the debunkers videos, then I will totally do that. I just thought this would be an interesting video to make. But yeah, so see you in the next one.